is compassion. The politics is purpose.
You may be termed out here, but does cleaning up the streets of California factor into a potential presidential run?
I'm never going to overpromise that in the short run. I mean, we are struggling in this state.
You're not answering my question.
Homelessness. No, housing and homelessness.
So the piece that I published is titled Newsom's National Model for Homeless, Racked by Fraud. It's published for Real Clear Investigations. There's original reporting in there. This is actual journalism. It's not just me commenting. In fact, I'm not allowed.
The conversation opens in the safest place possible: compassion, purpose, and leadership. Gavin Newsom speaks in broad strokes, framing politics as service rather than ambition. Housing and homelessness are presented as complex challenges, not failures. Everything sounds reasonable, even admirable. But beneath the calm tone is an unspoken question hovering in the room. Are these words backed by results, or are they just well-rehearsed lines meant to travel nicely on camera?
To support building more reservoirs in the state in order to bulk up our water infrastructure because we live in a drought-prone state. That passed in 2014. Funding was attached to it. You want to know how many reservoirs have been built since 2014? Zero. This state is an utter joke because of the people who are governing it. Gavin Newsom right now is at the
When the topic of a potential presidential run enters the conversation, Newsom carefully sidesteps any bold commitments. He avoids overpromising, acknowledging the state's struggles while softening responsibility. It's a familiar move. Own the problem just enough to sound honest, but never enough to be cornered. Ana Kasparian doesn't challenge him yet. She listens. She waits. Because she knows optimism sounds strongest before it's tested.
To criminal justice reform, what I thought I was signing on to was we're going to reform our prisons. But the idea of, oh, we're just not going to punish anyone for pretty much anything is not what I thought I was signing up for. But that's pretty much what we've gotten. And preemptively shutting down, 4 to 5 state prisons without really having a plan in place for what happens to oftentimes violent inmates was a disastrous idea by Gavin.
The tone shifts when Ana brings up her investigative reporting on Project Homekey. This isn't commentary or opinion. It's documented reporting, published through Real Clear Investigations, backed by audits, data, and official findings. Fraud, mismanagement, criminal investigations. Suddenly, the conversation isn't about values anymore. It's about accountability. And accountability doesn't care how polished you sound.
In the Democratic Party right now, people are going to get mad at me for saying this, but I genuinely feel there isn't much. I don't know who the next leader of this party is going to be. Everyone is kind of singing the praises of Gavin Newsom. I live in California. He's the governor here. He's a disaster of epic proportions. Right. Most Americans don't know that yet, but if he's going to be the leader of the opposition and if he's the Democratic candidate in 2028, I think this country's in a lot of trouble.
Newsom continues speaking the language he knows best: vision, progress, intention. But, wink with a frown, Ana doesn't interrupt. She allows the narrative to build and then quietly introduces the most dangerous question in politics. How is it actually going? That single question pulls the discussion out of abstraction and drags it into reality. The atmosphere changes, not loudly, but
Okay. You must. It's a necessity.
So, Democratic establishment candidates are full of shit. And I need people to understand that. And we need to get out of this vicious pendulum swing cycle where we go from one terrible administration to another terrible administration. They just have different branding. But in the end, they do nothing for ordinary people. And that's what people are hungry for. I think that's part of what explains.
When water infrastructure comes up, Ana delivers a statistic that lands like a gut punch. California voters approved funding for new reservoirs back in 2014. Money was allocated. Plans were announced. And yet, years later, not a single reservoir has been built. Zero. The silence that follows does more damage than any accusation ever could.
Yield tax, but it's actually there. We pay more than we need to because of the corruption that politicians engage in.
There's a lot of BS out there about how it's working, when in reality it's not. We already have 2 federal criminal indictments related to this program.
I call it the unholy trinity of Gavin Newsom. You have the homelessness, which is a complete shambles, and also the speed rail that went nowhere.
Oh my God.
It's basically
The discussion moves to criminal justice reform, and Ana explains where intentions collided with consequences. Prison closures happened without a real plan for managing violent offenders. Facilities were shut down preemptively, and communities were left to deal with the fallout. This wasn't reform. It was recklessness disguised as progress. And it happened under Newsom's leadership.
Gives you a sense of what these local politicians really care about, and it's themselves, their own political careers, and it disgusts me. Gavin Newsom, in every single interview I've seen him do, has passed the buck, even though he is the governor of this state.
Yeah.
He is pathetic. He's a snake. He's like the slimiest Democratic politician, certainly on a local level. But what we have seen is mismanagement of epic proportions.
Ana expands the focus beyond one policy. She questions the broader pattern, a leadership style that celebrates announcements but struggles with execution. Newsom talks about caring deeply. Ana doesn't deny that. Instead, she asks the harder question. What happens when caring isn't followed by...
It's very likely that he is going to point to his signature homeless housing policy as what will be a national model for solving the very real problem of homelessness in the United States. And if anyone is enticed by his campaigning on that, you should know that that signature policy, known as Project Homekey, has been riddled with fraud, scathing audits, and at this...
As pressure builds, Newsom retreats into generalities. Big ideas. Big vision. Ana responds by narrowing the lens. Dates. Outcomes. Results. Specificity. Each time he zooms out, she pulls him back in. The contrast becomes stark. One side is selling possibility. The other is demanding proof.
And it is real. The existence of climate change should not be utilized as a talking point in order to pass the buck, in order to deflect blame, in order to refuse to take any personal responsibility for how poorly this state has been governed for several years now. I am so disgusted with these people. I mean, Newsom is the governor. He's the top dog in California.
Ana warns viewers directly. Project Homekey, often praised as a national solution for homelessness, has been riddled with fraud. Audits reveal massive waste. Criminal indictments are already on the table. Instead of solving homelessness, the policy may have made it worse, while burning taxpayer money along the way.
And for the first time in my life, why it takes journalists sometimes months to work on a story and publish a story. But with that in mind, I want to share the details of what I've learned and why we need to hold members of our own party accountable when they're engaged in wrongdoing, when they're engaged in policies that actually end up stealing money from taxpayers while simultaneously making the problem that they're supposedly trying to fix.
What makes this exchange unforgettable isn't confrontation. It's restraint. Ana allows pauses to stretch. She lets unanswered questions hang in the air. Those moments force the audience to notice the gaps between words and reality. Newsom remains calm, but the space around his answers keeps shrinking.
Actually, what he did was bail out PG&E, even though PG&E essentially started the fires in Paradise, California.
Right.
They couldn't be bothered to replace a $10 hook that was nearly 100 years old, and that hook was holding the power lines up.
Right.
So just think about that. These hooks are basically falling apart. Power lines are falling. We have dry conditions in California. And so it's a tinderbox. We live in a...
By now, it's clear this isn't an ideological fight. It's a performance review. Execution is the charge. Progress is the claim. Reality is the evidence. Ana doesn't accuse Newsom of bad intentions. She exposes how ineffective leadership can be just as damaging as malicious leadership.
Election and basically deal with Gavin Newsom's campaigning, it's really important for people to understand what his leadership actually looks like. And one of the policies that he's very likely going to tout as what he sees as a national model is this Project Homekey policy. But fact of the matter is, it's just been one disaster after another.
In the end, there is no dramatic collapse. Newsom doesn't shout or stumble. He simply runs out of room. The illusion of control fades. What remains is a calm, methodical exposure of how easily polished narratives fall apart when met with preparation, persistence, and facts. It's a quiet loss, and those are the ones that linger longest. #.